Well, today on Nova Legends podcast, I have Jill Patterson, who recently won the Gran Fondo National Championship. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you, Julian. I'm so happy to be on this podcast.
Oh, well, I'm glad to have you. I've been following you on Facebook. I was a cycling teammate of Dave Osborne, and my favorite YouTuber, Ryan Lee, did a great interview with Dave, Super Dave, and then he did a great interview with you. And that's when I first got exposed to you and Gran Fondo, which I had never heard of. I've been away from racing for many years, but I've been following you ever since. And I got to be honest, it's tough to be your Facebook friend because you do a lot of fun stuff while the rest of us are stuck in Northern Virginia.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very lucky. I travel a lot. I have lots of adventures. So it's really nice that people do follow it and they cheer for me and kind of join me on my adventures.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it, the last 6 or 8 months, a year. I mean, Colombia, Mexico, California, New York City, France. I know I'm forgetting quite a few, but you've been around the world.
Yes, I definitely have.
Yeah. So, well, anyway, so for folks who don't know cycling quite as well as we do, I mean, we all know that there's criteriums, which are races around a city block. Generally, there's circuit races, which is a big version of that, maybe a 5-mile loop around an area. And then you have point-to-point races, road races. There's time trials. There's stage races, which could be a combination of all those races. And then, the pro level, you have teams where the racers generally, they race for a result of 1 or 2 members. So we kind of see that on TV. We watch Tour de France. We watch some of the other races. But what is Gran Fondo? What is the goal, and what is the structure of a Gran Fondo race?
So Gran Fondo racing, they're typically much longer races. So if you take a road race, it's actually a little bit longer than that. So typically they can be anywhere from about 60 miles to 100 miles. 100 miles is kind of the standard. Most of the Gran Fondos I do are right around 100 miles. And they can be varying terrain, but many of them tend to have a lot of climbing and hills on them. So both the length and the climbing really suit me. So for me, this is definitely the type of racing I am best at. Okay,
and so have you done other types of racing as well? Like, have you done? I think one of your videos you said you're not a professional, but have you done like the Pro 1-2 at the Clarendon Cup? Have you done pro level road races before?
So yes, I have. Actually, when I started cycling, that was in Japan, and I was on a women's team there. And I did travel with them, and I was able to do some pro level racing. It's interesting because now I'm actually much better than I was then, but I'm not a pro racer. And so I kind of jumped into it really early in my cycling career as kind of trial by fire, and I wish that I would have the opportunity now. Sometimes I think, wow, I would be so much better. I just know what's going on more. But it was definitely an amazing learning experience to be able to do that, like in my 2nd or 3rd year of cycling.
Yeah. Are all Gran Fondos, are they all scored the same? So how are they scored? I know I watched your video with Ryan. You said that it was different the way they scored. They scored this one. So I wasn't sure how the other ones are scored and what the differences are.
Yeah, so they're kind of 2 main series that I've been doing. I do a lot of the GFNY races, and those are around the world, and they're kind of unique in that they are start to finish. They're unique to compared to the other series that I do, because that's the US series, and I think that's when Americans think of Gran Fondo, that's kind of what they think of. It's the standard, and that is time segments. So it really doesn't matter when you cross the start line or the finish line. You could take 8 hours, but it just really matters how fast you're doing those time segments. Usually it's 4 segments. So for this one I just did, it was the actual racing was only about 1 hour and 15 minutes for me. And that's what was scored. And the New York one, or the GFNY ones that I've been doing, like in France and in a couple other countries, that is sort of a typical road race in the sense whoever crosses that finish line first is the winner.
Right. So if that's the case, why is it so different than a regular road race? Like, for example, why would a person specialized in these races instead of doing, all the Cat 1 road races that you see in the area?
That's a great question. So one, these are longer than most road races for women, and they're hillier for me. There are road races out there that are hilly, but they're kind of far away and hard to get to. And then the real drawing point for me, and the reason I love Gran Fondos and I find them so unique and almost very different from the typical racing, like if I were just to race the Pro 1-2 women's racing, the reason is that the Gran Fondos, I get to race with everybody. I get to race with the men. I get to race with all ages. So it's not just women, it's me just versus everyone at my ability. And I love the added dimension of, hey, I'm racing with these guys. Ultimately, I'm not being scored against them. So I can use them. How can they benefit me? How can I use them to get a faster time? So I love that.
Yeah. So it seems like you have to do some politicking on the road, which that happens in regular road racing as well. You'll work with other teams. You'll make friends on the road. Like when I did road races, generally, with Artemis, we were a small team. So I'd have friends from other teams. Like Batley, I think what they're called, Harley Davidson or something back then. But, I'd make friends on the road. And so it's a very typical aspect of racing. But it seems this is even more so. Like I remember listening to your interview with Ryan, you had to convince some dude, a random dude that was with you, that look, I don't want the group behind me to catch us because I don't care where you are. There's only one woman up the road. And if that group behind catches, there might be 10, 15 women in that group. And one of them, or a lot of them, might be able to out sprint me. So you probably have to do a lot of politic and a lot of deal making on the road, or just trying to get people, just begging people to be nice.
Kind of. I mean, honestly, it doesn't take that much begging. Often, because these men are racing, and usually the group I'm with, it's not with the top guys. So these guys know that they're not competing at that point for a podium. They've lost the podium. So they just want to do their best. And then here comes this woman, and a lot of them often love the idea of helping me, or any woman for that matter. Like it gives them a purpose, their purpose for the podium maybe is no longer, but then they can really, add something to somebody else's ride. So a lot of people are all gung-ho about, helping me and it's not like I'm just sucking their wheel. I also pull, I try to contribute. So it goes both ways.
Do you ever set that up before the race? Do you ever race with some men in the peloton that might be able to help you later on down the road?
That's a great question. So I have gone to races with groups of friends where we all say, hey, we're going to work together and target these segments. So it's sort of like we have a team, and they're not necessarily working for me. We're all working together. So I've done that recently this year. I really haven't been able to go to any of these races with friends. So it's just me on the road. So no, I'm alone for these most recent races, but it's interesting that a lot of the higher level women in the international races, I noticed that they do come with guys who sort of act as their support. So it's definitely in the Gran Fondo world for female racing. There does tend to be that system of guys coming to help a woman.
Now, one thing I think I noticed in some of your pictures is that everyone wears the same uniform, I thought, which is very confusing because when I'm on the road, you know if someone wears, even if it's their shoes or socks, you just get a sense of who's who by what they're wearing. And if everyone's wearing the same kit, it could be kind of confusing. Where is that? Where's the genesis of that?
So in the GFNY racing, that's the standard. You have to wear their kit. And I think that originated because they started in New York. And I think to put on the race, the police actually required that because they wanted to know who are the riders in the race that we need to account for and who are not. So that was maybe a legal thing, but from there, they've extended it to all of their racing. For the Gran Fondo National Series, there actually is no requirement for wearing the same jerseys. So the one I just did, most people were wearing different jerseys.
Right. And do you prefer it that way, or do you like it when everyone has the same jersey on?
I don't really have a preference. You are right that it can be confusing, finding your people. I do find it a little difficult to pick out the women sometimes when everyone's in the same jersey. So sometimes it's a little easier to find my competitors when I'm in the Gran Fondo National Series where everyone is wearing their team jerseys, because I can target, like, I know who they are, I know what their teams are, I know what their jerseys are. But you do have the bib shorts. So at least in the GFNY series, I can look at the bib shorts and that helps me identify.
How lucrative are the races? If you win, how much prize money can you expect to win? And can you get sponsorships based on your results?
There really isn't prize money. I do not make money from racing. I spend way more than I make. There are great prizes though. I have gotten some amazing prizes. Every race is different, so that varies. Some of the travel I've done that's actually been a prize. So that's a great way to keep my passion alive. I win a race and that kind of feeds into my next race and it enables me to go to the next race. As far as sponsorships and things, that has not really come through Gran Fondo. I think sponsors are looking at other things right now. They're looking at gravel, they're looking at pro teams, they're looking at road races and crits. So right now for sponsorship, Gran Fondos are not really on their radar.
How long has Gran Fondo been around? And what was the how did it get started?
Honestly, I don't even know. That's a great question. I would love to know. I think it's probably more of a European thing. I think it's been adopted from Europe. They have like the stage races, the long epic race, that's their history. So I think America, it's very easy for us to put on criterium racing in cities. And I think that's sort of what maybe started and took over here. But Gran Fondo's definitely, it's held on. And I think it is growing. I think it's very popular among older riders, because it's sort of a choose your own adventure. You can do it as a race, you can do it as a fun ride. It's a very inclusive environment. It's very encouraging. Generally, it's a very safe format. So I think it attracts a lot of the older riders.
Yeah. So for folks who don't know, in cycling, everyone wears the kit of their sponsor, and the team will have the same uniforms on, but there are other jerseys you can wear. You can wear the leader's jersey in a stage race, a points jersey, the national champions jersey, the ultimate jerseys, the rainbow jerseys, there's other jerseys. Well, you won a jersey the other day, the national champion. I think you're not wearing it. If it was me, I'd probably be sleeping in it. But a lot of times you see national champion jerseys on the road. People go buy them from bikes.com or World Cycling, whatever it is. But it's such an honor to wear a national champions jersey. So what was the feeling of that race? And tell us a little bit about that race.
So it was just a great feeling to get that jersey and put it on. And I'm pretty sure that one of the rules is once you win that national champion jersey, on future jerseys, you can actually get the stars and stripes on your sleeve. So that's my next goal. One of my next kits, I would love to have that put on there. So this race, it was a fantastic race. I went into it kind of knowing who my competitors would be. There's a start list, so I was able to see which women would be there. I looked at past years and their times. So I had chosen, maybe 4 or 5 women to kind of keep an eye out for. So at the start, it's a mass start. There are probably 250 of us, and the women were actually staged behind the men. So we were pretty far back. So I knew the priority for me was to get towards the front before that first time segment, because that's where all the fastest guys would be, or people. And I wanted to be on those wheels, because these segments, it's almost like a team time trial. In a race, it doesn't matter how fast you go. It just matters that you pass the finish first. Mm-hmm. But in time segments, it does matter how fast you go, because there could be someone way behind you who does the time segment 10 minutes later and they go faster than you and you don't know. So you just have to go as fast as you can. So at the start, I just weaved through people. I had about 8 miles before that first segment. I got up to the front. The other 3 or 4 women who I was keeping an eye on, they were also at the front. So it was the perfect combination position for me. So I made sure to cross that timing line after all the women. So that bought me a few seconds. And then my goal in each segment was start behind them and then finish in front of them. And by doing that, you get the shortest time. So that's what I did. I would start behind, I would go up, I would stay sort of on their wheels until they either started fading or something happened, and then I would pass them. And so I ended up, I think I got the fastest time on all the segments because of that strategy.
Wow. So kind of like tracing Strava frames. You don't really know if you won until the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a very tense moment. You know, they do a great job of uploading the results very quickly. So I was standing in line for food, like looking, and I saw those 4 women, all their results were uploaded, and I was pretty sure, okay, there's not going to be other fast women coming up after that. So once I saw that, I kind of knew, okay, I think I got it.
Yeah. Well, one of your, I won't say role models because she's a competitor and you actually beat her. But one of the, I guess, the grand champions in Gran Fondo is Camilla Cortes. I believe she's Colombian.
Yes.
How did she get started in Gran Fondo, if you know? And is she very popular and famous? I know Colombia has got a rich climbing culture, rich cycling culture.
Yeah, so I do not know how she started, but I definitely admire her. Any of the women who are sort of doing what I'm doing around my age, and you know, maybe they could be pro, but for whatever reason they choose not to be. You know, we're sort of taking a different path. It's sort of this unknown path. It's not that common. So, and there are not that many of us in the world that I know of. So the few that are, I really do admire them. So I totally admire the path she's chosen in her life with her cycling career. And yes, she's extremely well known and popular in Colombia. She's been doing Gran Fondos for many, many years there. And so many Colombians know her. So it was really an honor to ride with her. Yeah, she's a fantastic person, super strong.
Yeah. Well, you had the good fortune or the industry to be in France riding those climbs in the last couple of weeks, and look like you had a lot of fun. One thing that struck me, tell us about that trip, but one thing that struck me is when you came back, you expressed sadness for going back to America with the aggressive drivers, or another way to put it is, I guess bicycles just, you know, gain more respect on the roads in Europe.
Yeah, so it's interesting because France, I think, is almost an outlier in Europe, because I talked to a few people who are European, not French, but from other countries, and they told me that when they go to France, they feel like the drivers are very respectful there. So I think it's just so a part of their culture, and everybody knows about cycling there, that it's very rare to meet an aggressive driver there. So yes, it was sad to come back to America, where I often do feel that aggression. You know, pretty much every ride I do outside, I assume someone's going to honk, an angry honk at me. But that said, it's interesting. I did a ride after the Gran Fondo yesterday. I forget the town, but it was like halfway in between Asheville and home. I just stopped and I did a ride, and I did it with a friend, and we were both so impressed with how kind and considerate the drivers were there. They were giving us plenty of room. You know, they weren't angry if we held them up. Like it felt like I was in France. So it's great when you do find pockets like that in the US.
Yeah, you know, you find pockets, but also you just have bad days. Like some days you go out there, everyone seems so angry, and then the next day you go on your bike and everyone's like letting you pass. Bikes,
Yeah.
cars, and it's almost like people are like they're plotting these days sometimes.
Yeah, true. Sometimes I feel there's something in the air. You know, I can have days here in America where people like cheer me on, like, go, you know. So.
Yeah. Have you ridden with your Stars and Stripes on yet?
No, I have not.
Yeah.
So I'll have to choose my first ride for that.
Yeah, I've ridden with the Freddie Rodriguez Stars and Stripes Damo jerseys from I think 99 or 2000. So, but everyone knew it wasn't my. I didn't earn it. That I bought it. So, so anyway, let's go back to talk about a little bit how you got involved in cycling. Were you athletic? Were you involved in a lot of sports, or were you always a cyclist?
No, I was not really an athlete. I was more of an academic in high school, if you wanted to, pigeonhole me. But after high school, I actually got into athletics in college because I gained weight and I wanted to lose it. So I started jogging a little bit, and then it just kind of took off from there. I had never done cycling. I was more into outdoor sports like rock climbing, backpacking. Like I said, I did a little jogging. And then I went to Japan to work and I couldn't do any of those sports that I was really into. And cycling was one of the few things I could do there. So that's where I started cycling. And then it just kind of took off from there. I loved it. It just suited me. It suited my personality, my body type. And I found like I was sort of naturally good at it.
That sounds very strange to me. Japan, with its population, that would seem like the last place on earth that you would start cycling.
Well, speaking of the kind drivers in France, in Japan, they're actually very considerate of cyclists. I think that's because they have so many motorbikes on the roads. They have so many slower users, like people walking. So they're just used to people being on their roads. They don't have the sense of road ownership. So it was a very safe place to start cycling. And there are cycling pockets. The town I lived in, we did have a club. So that's through that club is kind of how I got introduced into it.
And a lot of times, clubs, cycling was very much a male sport when I was doing it. And I was on, Artemis was like a female team. We had Dave had brought some dudes on. So we definitely had some guys. And the Copies had some really strong female riders as well. But there wasn't very many African Americans riding back in the mid to late 90s, or women. And I see things have changed. I ride by myself now, but when I see clubs riding, it seems to be more diverse in terms of females and men. But I do think that some women have to get comfortable being out in traffic. It's a sport where you're dressing, a cyclist dresses in a different way. It's a sport where females have to gravitate toward it. It has to be a draw. It has to be exposed to females, or they're never going to really get started with it, I think.
I'd agree with that. I think there can definitely be some big hurdles for getting into it, but I do have to say that this area is exceptional. I've traveled to so many other areas in the US and the world, and there are more females riding here. There's far more diversity here. I mean, it's just, I think it's kind of this unique little cycling bubble. So in terms of women stepping into cycling, this is a great area to do it. It's very welcoming, and there are many groups and many different levels and resources out there for them to make that transition very smooth.
It also makes the club rides more enjoyable when you have diversity, when you have women and you have different folks instead of a bunch of dudes. Because I remember when I first started racing, it was all white dudes and maybe a couple of African Americans in the peloton, but out of 100, maybe one or two of us. It's nice that it's changed. When did you go from enjoying cycling to thinking about time traveling or racing?
So in Japan, I was just enjoying. I actually started by touring. I would do like 3-day trips over long weekends and things, and I really loved that. And then in Japan, hill climbing is very popular, and specifically races. So I just thought, hey, I'll try a hill climb race. And I did pretty well. I mean, I was surprised, and that sort of sucks you in, when you are successful at something, it just makes you want to do it a little bit more. So just the stepping stones, it continued that way. And actually that led me to joining that women's team in Japan, where that was really the next level up, where we were doing like the UCI racing. And it was like too much too soon. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to train. I kind of overdid it, and I burned out. And when I moved back to America about 6 years ago, I actually had intended to stop cycling. I was not going to be a cyclist anymore. I just wanted to cycle for fun. I was sort of burned out of like trying to compete. So I came back telling everyone, no, I'm just going to do group rides. So I did a couple group rides in this area. And people said, hey, you should race. Like, you're fast, you're strong. And I was like, oh, but I really don't want to race. But actually, Dave from Artemis, he was like, really, you should consider doing this. So he nudged me to get back into racing. And then Emil Carr, who is also on Artemis, he runs Pikesville Jewelry. He actually was like, I will sponsor you. You are a strong rider. I want to sponsor you. Please do the Frederick Gran Fondo. This is a good race for you. You would like it and you'd be good at it. I had never heard of a Gran Fondo, but he and his shop, they were sponsoring me, and I was like, okay, thank you. I'll do it. And I won it. And then he was like, I'm going to sponsor you for the New York race. And that's a big race. And so I thought, I better train for this. Like, if he's going to sponsor me and really believe in me, I want to put work back. So I hired a coach. That was the first time I ever had a coach. I did structured training. That was really the first time I really had one specific goal race in mind. I worked very hard for 6 months. I got second place, and then kind of went from there. I was like, if I can get second, maybe I can get first. So I trained again. Next year, got first, and that kind of got the whole ball rolling.
Yeah. Well, one thing about your personality, you seem very nice and very pleasant. And, you know, Dave is too. And it's funny. I always felt like when you race bicycles, you have to be a little bit ruthless. You have to be a little bit willing to shirk your responsibility at the front. You got to not chase stuff. Everyone else is mad at you. There are certain things a cyclist has to do if he wants to. And I remember I was fortunate enough that I won the Jeff Cup when I was a Cat 5. And there was these two really strong racers that just broke open the field, and I was able to follow them. But I didn't help at all. And they spent 20 miles just complaining and fussing at me. And then they said, look, we're going to go 3 across. And I was like, sure. So when I won the race, I thought they'd never speak to me again. And I'm still friends with one of these guys. Peter Huffnagel's his name. He has a racing team in Charlottesville. But, you know, I always felt that way, that you have to be a little bit ruthless to win. And my personality generally is I want to be liked. And you seem to be very nice as well. So have you ever had to, you know, adjust to the realities of being a bicycle racer, that you can't be so nice and you have to, you know, make deals, break deals, and those kind of things?
Yeah, it's so great that you mentioned that, because that's definitely part of racing. You do have to be a little ruthless and almost like mean, you know, how I would define mean. And it's funny because just on Sunday in this race, I switched between those two modes during the race. So of course, like I want to get to know the women. You know, they're doing what I do. They're pouring their heart and soul into it. I respect them. I think they're awesome. I want to get to know them. So in between the time segments, we were all chatting. So I was just becoming friends with my competitors. And then the time segment starts, and I'm like, I'm going to start behind them. When I pass them, I'm going to make sure I pass really fast. So like they think, I can't catch her. You know, like I'm ruthlessly going about it. So I'm going to win that segment as much as I can. And then you cross the finish line, and then you're back to like, hey, let's chat.
Yeah.
So you know, luckily I was strong enough to win those segments, but had I not been the faster rider that day, you know, good for them. Like, they beat me. I'm super proud of them, you know, check my ego. Once you cross that finish line, you're back to just being a person. And ultimately we're all doing it. We all want to be safe and enjoy our sport for a long time. So let's, you know, keep it friendly.
Well, I don't know if you do crits, but when you do crits, you have to fight for that wheel. You can't. I'm so polite, and people will come in, and I'll keep getting pushed back and back because I don't want to really hold that wheel. It's just not my nature. Do you ever go through that struggle as well? Like Dave is the nicest guy in the world, but he's always in third wheel no matter what. I'm like, how do you do that? And I just think maybe over time people just give it to him because that's Dave Osborne. But how about you? How do you handle that kind of the reality that you have to hold your ground, fight for that wheel, and not be polite?
Yeah, it's true. You do get used to it. That's something that's come to me over time. I'm still not great at it, but I have learned if there's a little space, I can sort of force my way in there. There are people who are way better at it than me, but yeah, you just have to do it. You have to be dominant, or else you won't be up there, and you have to be up there in certain moves to win it. So yeah, I think it's just something over time you learn how to do. And you did mention that maybe because it's Dave Osborne, they just let him in, which there is an element of truth in that. Like, in this area, people do tend to know who I am. They know that I'm a strong rider, and hopefully will not gap them. So they trust me. If I go in front of them, they're willing to let me in because they trust that I'm a safe rider, they can follow me, and I'll hold that wheel.
Yeah, that's great. So what are you doing these days in terms of your training? Now, you mentioned earlier, and I want to get to your coaching, but you mentioned earlier you got a coach. Do you still use that coach? Or because you're a coach yourself, do you do your own training programs? And what kind of, do you do periodization? You know, what kind of, and I know it's tough because you've probably been, trying to peak for certain events. But anyway, what's your training regimen like?
Okay, so ultimately, I bike because I love biking. I never started biking because I love racing. So it's very important to me to keep that spirit. So half of my rides are just kind of group rides, fun rides. And then I would say half are very structured and I have a goal in mind. I'm looking at the power and doing intervals. But I need to have both of that to keep the longevity in my sport for me. And a lot of the athletes I coach are actually like that too. Very few of them want to follow structure every single day. They get burned out. You know, we do it because it's social and it's fun and we get to ride with other people. So for myself and as a coach, I try to incorporate that. So there are ways that you can continue to get better by doing less structured riding. And then as far as me having a coach, I have been self-coached at times. I've had different coaches. Part of the reason I like to have a few different coaches over the past few years is I learn from them. Every coach has a different approach. So every coach I take on to coach me, I'm also kind of studying and making my own coaching better by learning different methods and approaches.
Now, is that how you became a coach? What is the process that you took to become a coach yourself?
So I started it very part-time, and that's how most coaches are, I think. There are definitely full-time coaches, but I think the majority of them have other jobs. So that's how I started. It was just, hey, I want to share my knowledge. I enjoy coaching. I enjoy working with people, encouraging them. I think I can help them. And I had other jobs. So at one point, I think I was juggling like 3 different jobs. And meanwhile, my coaching was increasing. I was getting more clients steadily over time. And now, so it's actually, I've transitioned into full-time. I'm very lucky that I can take on enough clients and make it doable. And that helps me support my current lifestyle of all the travel because it's a fairly mobile job.
And what kind of coach do you like? What philosophy do you embrace? What kind of coach do you consider yourself? I mean, so, you know, back when I was riding, everyone was trying to, you know, be like Chris Carmichael because he was attached to Lance Armstrong. And, you know, turns out a lot of that may have been other factors, but, you know, where is coaching today and what kind of coach are you?
Coaching today, there are actually so many resources for coaches and just the general public. Like anyone can buy these books and study and learn. It's all out there. It's public knowledge. So I try to take that and then use my own experiences and then also just what I've seen over the years with my friends, working with different people, their experiences. And I really have a holistic approach where it's not just the numbers. I mean, you could have amazingly strong numbers and lose every single race. It's so much more than that. You know, it's the physical, it's the mental, it's the tactics. It's, you know, the sweet talk with the riders during the race. It's like, there's so much that goes into it. So when I'm working with athletes, you know, we are looking at the power, we are trying for those physical improvements, of course, but we're also talking about how did you feel? You know, why did this happen? What could you do differently next time? Like, here are some tactics. Why don't you try this? Things like that.
What percentage of your clients are internet clients or, you know, telephone clients, people that you communicate with, but you never see? And do you have clients, local clients that you ride with and you may even go to the races as well?
Yeah, so I ride. So a lot of my clients are actually friends and we were friends and we were riding partners. And then they were like, hey, can you coach me? So I do ride with some of my clients. Some of them are very far away in other countries. So I've never met them. I only know them remotely, but it's amazing, you know, Zoom and looking at their workouts online. I can analyze the data of their workouts and almost, I could tell them exactly what they did. And they're like, how'd you know I was standing there? And it's like, well, I could see it in your cadence and your heart rate and this. So that's great. In the world of coaching now, it is very, remote and done through the apps and the computers and the programs and the analysis. That's actually super helpful.
Yeah. What are some of the common mistakes that riders make? Like, what is the easiest way for a person to improve his results on his local Sunday club ride? Just, be up near the front near, on the preems, and just, which makes the experience more enjoyable.
I think the most common mistake is doing too much and not resting. People think I need more fitness, so I have to do more, when in fact, a lot of athletes actually could benefit from doing less. And I like to say, instead of just doing kind of the same thing like that, you need to do this. So you need to go super easy sometimes. So that prepares you to go super hard. And that's how you want to be training.
Right. So I have a friend who just, he took up rowing during the pandemic. It was all online. The competitions were all virtual, and he became like, world champ in his age group, like 50 to 55. And his training was basically of the hour he would train, or maybe 30 minutes he would train, he'd have 1 or 2 minutes of extreme punishment. And then the rest of it was very easy. And he was just telling me about this training system for rowing. And it reminds me of how I used to train when I used to ride. I would have fun. I'd go on, the 10 o'clock ride and 7 o'clock ride. And there's moments of pain in those rides. And I would, try to do as well as I can. And then I would just enjoy the rest of the ride. And it didn't seem too different than how I used to train when I was racing.
Yeah, that's very true. And, it really kind of depends on what you're doing. Like the local group rides, maybe 2 hours and the extreme pain, and then the easy. For me, Gran Fondos, it's not 2 hours, it's like 5 hours. And it's a lot more just constant low grade pain. So, I'm training differently for that than I would be for the local rides. And you asked about periodization earlier. And yes, I definitely have to periodize, because I can't be an all around rider all times of the year. Like right now, I was in France, I was doing these long, steady climbs. So my base is great. Put me on a 20-minute climb, I'll crush it now. Put me in a criterium where I'm surging over and over, or a local group ride where we're attacking a 30-second hill. Right now, I'd probably get dropped. That's just not in my system right now. So you just can't be 100% ready for all kinds of racing. So you have to pick and choose.
Yeah. Well, last question, Jill. And this has been great. Look, you're living your dream now, so it's just a strange question. But what are your long-term goals? I mean, what do you see yourself 5-10 years down the road? Do you want to still be racing and training? What have you thought about the future?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because I actually do think a lot about that. Because right now, I'm lucky enough that I'm young enough. I'm still strong, but I know the corner's coming. I'm 41. I'm not going to be able to hold it against these 20-year-olds for very much longer. So my ultimate goal is I want to step into that gracefully. When my performance starts to decline because of age, I want to focus on the other people around me. I want to share what I've learned. I want to cheer those younger up and coming riders on. I want to, the 60-year-old who just started riding and is getting into it, I want to help that person to enjoy their biking life. So that is my goal, is to, I'm going to live the racing and do as well as I can for as long as I can. And then, the focus isn't going to be on me for very much longer, maybe another year or two. And then I want to put it outwards. And then also I would love to just continue to travel internationally and bike. That's kind of my goal.
That sounds great. Well, look, Jill, you're a great ambassador for the sport. I think sometimes cycling personalities can be a little prickly and tough. It can be a kind of a tough business, and it's great to follow you on Facebook. You look like you're having fun. You make cycling seem fun, and it can be if you do it the right way and you're around the right people and on the right climbs and on the right roads. So anyway, I hope you keep doing what you're doing. Hopefully, maybe one day I can even see you out there, and I can maybe learn a thing or two from a national champion.
Thank you so much, Julian. This is great.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep in touch.
Thanks.
Okay, Jill. Bye-bye.